Turn around. Hands behind your back. Now.
I am not resisting. But you are arresting the homeowner on her own driveway.
You refused a lawful order.
No, you refused the Constitution, and this camera is recording your mistake.
Get in the car.
I'm complying under duress. Remember this.
Officer Kyle Braden didn't hesitate. He didn't pause to consider the precise, educated diction of the woman standing before him. He didn't look at the well-manicured flower beds, the high-end hose reel, or the relaxed posture of the 58-year-old woman standing in the driveway of a colonial-style home. All he saw was a black woman in a wealthy neighborhood who wasn't doing exactly what he told her to do. He stepped forward, grabbed her wrist, and twisted her arm behind her back. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct," Braden shouted, the adrenaline in his voice cracking slightly. "I am not resisting," the woman said, wincing as the metal cuffs bit into her wrists. "But let the record show that Officer Braden badge number 492, I see it on your chest, is arresting the homeowner of 4201 Oakwood Drive. And Officer Braden has absolutely no idea that the woman he is currently manhandling has signed more search warrants for the FBI than he has written traffic tickets." The woman standing next to the hydrangeas wasn't screaming. She wasn't begging for help. She was Magistrate Judge Evelyn Vance, a fixture of the federal district court for over 25 years. She had presided over complex RICO cases, authorized wiretaps for counterterrorism operations, and sent corrupt politicians to federal prison. And now she was being handcuffed in her gardening clogs by a 29-year-old officer who was about to become the defendant in a lawsuit that would bankrupt his career. Before we unravel every layer of this infuriating and absolutely shocking story, I need you to do something for me. Stop what you're doing and drop a comment right now telling me where you are watching from, your city, your state, your country. And if you believe that nobody, absolutely nobody, should be arrested for existing in their own front yard, hit that subscribe button. You need to see how this ends, because the payout for this mistake is going to be historic. Evelyn Vance was not a woman who panicked. Panic was for people who didn't know the rules. Evelyn wrote the rules. Standing at 5'7", with graying hair pulled back into a sensible bun, she exuded the kind of quiet authority that usually made seasoned attorneys stutter in her courtroom. But here, under the bright Tuesday morning sun, that authority was being ignored. "You have the right to remain silent," Braden recited, spinning her around to face his patrol car. "I am fully aware of my rights under Miranda," Evelyn said, her voice ice cold. "I am also aware of yours, and I am aware that you have just stripped yourself of qualified immunity by violating clearly established Fourth Amendment protections. You have no articulable facts to support this detention. Get in the car," Braden snapped, shoving her toward the back seat. "I am complying," Evelyn said, looking directly into the lens of his body camera. "I am entering the vehicle under duress. My front door is unlocked. My identification is on the kitchen island. My keys are in my pocket. If you had done even a modicum of investigation, you would know this." Braden slammed the door shut. He breathed heavily, feeling the rush of the arrest, completely unaware that he had just put the final nail in the coffin of his own law enforcement career. To understand the magnitude of this mistake, you have to understand the morning that preceded it. It was a Tuesday, a rare federal holiday where the courthouse was closed. For Judge Evelyn Vance, this was sacred time. For the last 3 decades, her life had been consumed by the weight of the law. Briefs, motions, hearings, sentencings. The relentless machinery of the justice system required her constant attention. But her garden, that was her sanctuary. She had lived in the Oakwood district for 12 years. It was an established, historic neighborhood characterized by century-old oak trees, winding driveways, and residents who valued their privacy. Most of her neighbors were retired doctors, university deans, or corporate executives. It was the kind of place where the loudest noise was usually a leaf blower or the distant hum of a pool filter. Evelyn had been up since 6:00 a.m. She had her coffee on the back patio, reviewing a draft opinion on a maritime law case before changing into her gardening clothes. These weren't rags. She wore a high-quality canvas apron, sturdy gardening gloves, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the sun. She took pride in her appearance even when she was knee-deep in mulch. She was currently focused on her prize-winning hybrid tea roses, specifically the Mr. Lincoln variety, deep red velvety, and incredibly fragrant. They required precise watering and pruning. She was standing near the edge of her driveway, the hose in one hand, gently misting the base of the bushes. It was peaceful. It was perfect. Then the cruiser turned the corner. It didn't cruise slowly. It accelerated aggressively, the engine roaring slightly as it closed the distance. Evelyn looked up, shielding her eyes. She wasn't alarmed initially. Police patrolled this neighborhood occasionally, though usually they offered a wave. But this car braked hard directly in front of her driveway, the tires crunching slightly on the asphalt. Officer Kyle Braden stepped out. He was new to the district, transferred from a busier, rougher precinct downtown. At 29, he had been on the force for 6 years, but he carried himself with the swagger of a rookie watching too many action movies. He wore his sunglasses on the back of his head, and his hand rested instinctively near his holster. He had received a call from dispatch regarding a suspicious person. The caller was a new neighbor 3 houses down, a man who had moved in from out of state just 2 weeks prior and hadn't yet met Evelyn. The call was vague. "There's a person wandering around the yard at 4201. Doesn't look like they belong. Maybe a vagrant or a confused worker." There was no report of a break-in, no report of theft, no description of criminal conduct, just someone who doesn't look like they belong. Braden looked at Evelyn. He didn't see a federal magistrate. He didn't see a homeowner. He saw a black woman in an apron in a neighborhood where the property values averaged $2 million. In his mind, the math didn't add up. He had already decided she was the suspect before he even put the car in park. "Hey!" Braden shouted across the lawn, bypassing a polite greeting entirely. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn turned off the nozzle on her hose. She didn't drop it. She just stopped the water flow. She stood straight, her posture correcting instantly from gardener to judge. "Good morning, officer," she said, her voice projecting clearly. "I am watering my roses. Can I help you with something?" "Do you work here?" Braden asked, walking onto the grass. He didn't walk up the driveway. He cut across the lawn, his heavy boots sinking into the turf she had just aerated. Evelyn watched his boots. "Officer, please stay on the pavement. You're damaging the lawn." "I asked you a question," Braden said, closing the distance. "Do you work for the homeowners?" "No," Evelyn said simply. "I do not work for the homeowners." "Then who are you?" "We got a call about a suspicious person trespassing on this property." "I am not trespassing," Evelyn said. "And unless you have a specific report of a crime, you are interrupting my morning." "I need to see some ID," Braden demanded, stopping 10 feet from her. This was the moment, the turning point. Evelyn knew the law better than anyone in the state. She knew that under Terry v. Ohio, an officer needed reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime had occurred, was occurring, or was about to occur to detain someone. She also knew that in this specific state there was no stop and identify statute that required a citizen to produce a physical ID card on their own property without an arrestable offense. She had a choice. She could explain who she was, show him the badge and her wallet inside, and end this. But she was tired. She was tired of the assumption. She was tired of having to prove she belonged in her own life. And more importantly, she knew that if she were a white woman in a sun hat, this conversation wouldn't be happening. "Officer," she said calmly, "I am under no legal obligation to provide identification to you. I am on private property. I am not engaged in any criminal activity. Unless you can articulate a crime, I am going to ask you to leave my property immediately." The silence that followed Evelyn's refusal was heavy. The birds were still singing in the oak trees, and a distant lawnmower hummed a few blocks away, but the air between Judge Vance and Officer Braden crackled with tension. Braden wasn't used to no. In the precinct he came from, when he demanded ID, people scrambled to give it to him out of fear. He wasn't equipped to handle a calm intellectual refusal. He interpreted her knowledge of the law as belligerence. He interpreted her dignity as disrespect. "You're refusing a lawful order," Braden asked, his voice dropping an octave, trying to sound intimidating. "It is not a lawful order," Evelyn corrected him, sounding like she was back in courtroom 4B addressing a rookie prosecutor. "It is an unconstitutional demand." Hybel V's, 6th Judicial District Court of Nevada, establishes that while you can ask for a name in some jurisdictions, you cannot demand physical identification papers without probable cause or reasonable suspicion of a crime. You have neither. A vague call about a suspicious person does not constitute reasonable suspicion when the person is plainly engaged in normal lawful behavior like gardening. Braden's face flushed. He took a step closer, violating her personal space. "Look, lady, I don't need a law lecture. I need to know who you are. If you live here, just show me proof." "I am standing here with a key fob in my pocket," Evelyn said. She tapped the pocket of her apron. "I can unlock the front door. I can unlock the Mercedes in the driveway. That should be sufficient to dispel your suspicion." "Take your hands out of your pockets," Braden yelled, his hand dropping to his taser. "My hands are visible," Evelyn said, keeping them raised slightly, palms open. "I said the key is in my pocket. I did not reach for it. You are not listening, officer. You are operating on a bias that is blocking your ability to process information. I am the homeowner. I am telling you this. If you arrest me or if you lay hands on me, you will be violating the Fourth Amendment prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure." "You're trembling," Braden noted, misinterpreting her vibration. "I am not trembling from fear," Evelyn said. "I am trembling from rage. I am trembling because I have spent 25 years upholding the Constitution and I am watching you trample on it in my driveway." "Last chance," Braden said. "ID, now." "Am I being detained?" Evelyn asked the magic question. "Yes, you are detained until I figure out who you are. Then I am invoking my right to remain silent until I can speak with my counsel. I will not provide physical identification because you have no grounds to demand it." Braden had backed himself into a corner. To leave now would be to admit defeat to this arrogant woman. To proceed was to cross a line he couldn't uncross. He chose the latter. "That's it," Braden said. "Turn around." "Officer, pause." Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a command register. "Think about what you are doing. Look at the house. Look at the car. Look at me. Does this look like a burglary? Does this look like trespassing? Or does it look like a homeowner who is tired of being harassed?" "I said turn around." Braden reached out. At that moment, the front door of the house next door opened. Mr. Henderson, a 72-year-old retired heavy machinery operator, stepped out onto his porch. He was a large man, white, with a history of back problems, but he moved quickly when he saw the commotion. He held his smartphone up the camera lens pointed directly at them. "Officer!" Mr. Henderson shouted. "What in the hell are you doing? That's Judge Vance." Braden heard him, but it didn't register. "Back off, sir," Braden yelled over his shoulder. "Do not interfere." "I'm not interfering, I'm recording," Henderson yelled back. "You're arresting the lady who lives there. Are you out of your mind?" Evelyn didn't look at her neighbor. She kept her eyes locked on Braden. "You have a witness now, officer. Mr. Henderson has lived next to me for 12 years. He has identified me. That is verification. You can stop this right now." But Braden was too far gone. The adrenaline tunnel vision had set in. The shouting neighbor just made him feel more threatened, more in need of control. He didn't hear Judge Vance. He just heard noise. "Hands behind your back." Braden grabbed Evelyn's left wrist and wrenched it behind her. The movement was forceful, unnecessary. I am not resisting, Evelyn stated loudly for the recording. I am allowing you to handcuff me to prevent you from causing me physical injury, but I am not consenting to this arrest. The cuffs clicked. 1, 2. Evelyn Vance, a woman who could sign a warrant to search the White House if the evidence supported it, was now shackled in her own driveway. The metallic click of the handcuffs seemed to echo through the quiet neighborhood. The scene was surreal. A meticulously maintained garden, the smell of damp earth and roses, and a uniformed police officer forcefully handling a woman who looked like she should be presiding over a board meeting. Mr. Henderson, the neighbor, was walking down his driveway now, still filming. I'm telling you, son, you are making a mistake the size of Texas. That is Evelyn Vance. She's a federal judge. You need to take those cuffs off her right now. Officer Braden spun Evelyn around to march her toward the car. He glanced at Henderson with disdain. Sir, back away or you'll be next for obstruction. This woman refused to identify herself and resisted a lawful detention. She doesn't have to show you jack squat on her own lawn, Henderson shouted, his voice shaking with the righteous anger of a man who had watched Evelyn Vance quietly bring soup to his wife when she was sick last winter. I'm identifying her. I'm telling you who she is. It's okay, Frank, Evelyn said, her voice surprisingly calm. She looked at her neighbor. Let him do it. Keep recording. Don't intervene physically. Just get everything on tape. I got it, Judge. I got every second of it, Henderson promised. Braden paused for a microsecond. The word judge penetrated the fog of his adrenaline. He looked at the woman in his grip. She didn't look like the judges he knew in traffic court. She was wearing dirt-stained gardening gloves. He dismissed it. People lied all the time. Judge was probably a nickname, or maybe she was some local justice of the peace. It didn't matter. She had disobeyed him. Watch your head, Braden said, pushing her down into the back seat of the cruiser. The back of a police car is designed to be dehumanizing. The hard plastic seat forces the body into an unnatural position, especially with hands cuffed behind the back. The plexiglass divider is scratched and stained, a barrier that separates the clean world of the free from the dirty world of the captured. Evelyn sat awkwardly. Her shoulder ached where he had twisted it. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. She began to catalog the sensations, the time-stamps, the words spoken. She was building her case file in her head. 10:14 a.m. Initial contact. 10:15 a.m. Refusal to identify based on lack of reasonable suspicion. 10:16 a.m. Officer ignored exculpatory evidence keys. 10:17 a.m. Officer ignored witness identification. 10:18 a.m. Unlawful arrest initiated. Outside, another car slowed down. It was Mrs. Gable, the retired university dean, from across the street. She rolled down her window, her face pale. Frank, she called out to Henderson. Is that Evelyn? What is happening? This idiot is arresting her, Henderson yelled. He thinks she's a trespasser. I'm calling the chief, Mrs. Gable said immediately. She didn't mean the police chief's office line. She meant she had his personal cell phone number because they served on the Rotary Club board together. Braden got into the driver's seat. He was sweating now. The neighborhood was waking up. He needed to get out of here. He started the engine and threw the car into drive, peeling away from the curb faster than necessary. What's your name? Braden asked, looking at Evelyn in the rearview mirror. He was trying to start the booking paperwork in his head, trying to regain control of the narrative. Evelyn stared at the back of his head. I am invoking my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I will speak only to my attorney or to your watch commander. Have it your way, Braden scoffed. We'll find out who you are at the station. Fingerprints don't lie. Won't. No, Evelyn thought. They don't. She looked out the window as her own neighborhood blurred past. She saw the familiar mailboxes, the manicured lawns. She felt a profound sense of violation, a deep, burning humiliation. But beneath it there was something colder. It was the absolute certainty of the destruction she was about to rain down on the San Diego Police Department. Braden picked up his radio. Dispatch 1 Adam 12. 1 female in custody, transporting to Central. Copy 1 Adam 12. Charges: obstruction, disorderly conduct, possible trespassing, subject refused to ID. Evelyn listened. Obstruction. The catch-all charge for contempt of cop. It wouldn't stick. None of it would stick. But the fact that he was calling it in meant it was on the official record. He was digging the hole deeper with every word. "Officer," Evelyn said, breaking her silence for one specific purpose, "I have a medical condition. The handcuffs are too tight. I am requesting you loosen them." "They're fine," Braden dismissed her. "I am informing you that you are causing nerve damage. This is a formal request for relief. If you deny it, it goes to the excessive force claim." Braden turned up the radio music. He didn't answer. The drive to the station took 20 minutes. It was 20 minutes of silence from the back seat that unnerved Officer Braden more than any screaming fit would have. Usually people begged. They cried. They threatened to call their dads or their bosses. They cursed. This woman just sat there. She breathed rhythmically. She stared at the back of his head with a focus that felt like a laser burning through his skull. When they pulled into the sally port of the precinct, the heavy metal doors rolled down, shutting out the sunlight. The smell of the station hit them as soon as Braden opened the car door, that specific mix of floor wax, stale coffee, and industrial disinfectant. "Let's go," Braden said, hauling her out. He walked her through the intake doors. The booking area was busy. A few drunks from the night before were being processed out, and a couple of younger officers were joking near the coffee machine. Sitting at the high desk was Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 57 years old, a veteran who had seen everything. He was 2 years away from retirement and had zero patience for nonsense. He was drinking a diet soda and reviewing shift reports when Braden walked in with his prisoner. Miller looked up. He saw Braden looking flushed and defiant. Then he looked at the prisoner. He saw a woman in expensive gardening clothes. He saw the posture. He saw the face. Miller squinted. He knew that face. He didn't know from where immediately, but his gut tightened. This wasn't a junkie. This wasn't a shoplifter. This was someone. "What do we have here, Braden?" Miller asked, his voice neutral. "Refusal to ID, obstruction, disorderly." Braden listed, guiding Evelyn to the counter. "Suspect was trespassing at a residence in Oakwood. Refused to leave, refused to identify." Evelyn looked at Sergeant Miller. "Sergeant," she said. Her voice was calm, authoritative. "My name is Evelyn Vance. I reside at 4201 Oakwood Drive. I was arrested on my own property while watering my roses." Miller froze. The name hit him like a freight train. Vance. He looked at her again. He pictured the federal courthouse. He pictured the formidable woman who sat on the high bench in courtroom 4B. He had testified in front of her 5 years ago on a wiretap case. She had chewed out the defense attorney so thoroughly that Miller had felt second-hand embarrassment. Miller stood up slowly. "Braden," he said, his voice very quiet. "Take the cuffs off." "Sarge, she's uncooperative. I haven't processed her yet," Braden argued. "She refused to ID." "Take the cuffs off," Miller said, enunciating every word. "Why?" Braden asked, confused. "Because," Miller said, walking around the desk, "if this is who she says she is, you just arrested a federal magistrate judge." The room went dead silent. The officers by the coffee machine stopped laughing. The typewriters stopped clacking. Braden laughed nervously, a short, dry chuckle. "No way, look at her, she's a gardener." "I am a federal magistrate for the Southern District," Evelyn said. "And my credentials are in my back pocket. I asked Officer Braden to check them 3 times. He refused." Miller walked up to Evelyn. "Ma'am, permission to retrieve your ID." Granted, Evelyn said. Miller reached into the back pocket of her jeans. He pulled out a slim leather wallet. He opened it. There it was. The gold shield, the photo ID, United States District Court, Magistrate Judge Evelyn J. Vance. Miller felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at the ID. He looked at Braden. Braden was staring at the badge. His mouth opened slightly. The arrogance evaporated, replaced instantly by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. "Oh," Braden whispered. "Oh is right," Evelyn said. "Now get these things off me." Miller fumbled for his key. His hands were shaking slightly. He unlocked the cuffs and they swung open. Evelyn rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. "Judge Vance," Sergeant Miller said, his voice trembling. I cannot apologize enough. There are no words." "Save it, Sergeant," Evelyn said. She didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded like she was issuing a sentencing guideline. "I want the watch commander, now. I want the chief of police called, now. And I want this officer." She pointed a gloved finger at Braden. "Removed from my presence immediately before I add a charge of battery to the lawsuit I am already drafting in my head." "Braden, get in the break room," Miller barked. "Give me your gun and your badge, now." "Sarge, I didn't know." Braden stammered, his face pale white. "She didn't show me." "Get out!" Miller roared. It was a sound that shook the bulletproof glass. Braden placed his weapon and shield on the counter and walked away like a dead man walking. 5 minutes later, Lieutenant Commander Higgins burst into the booking area. He had been eating an early lunch when Miller called him. He had run down the hall. "Judge Vance," Higgins said, breathless. "I am Lieutenant Higgins. Please come to my office. I am not going to your office, Lieutenant," Evelyn said. She was standing in the middle of the booking area, rubbing her wrists. "I am standing right here where your officer dragged me. I want the incident report printed. I want the body camera footage preserved and a copy burned to a drive immediately. I want the 911 call recording." "We will get you everything, Judge. Everything," Higgins promised. "Please, can I get you some water? Can we call someone for you?" "You can call a car to take me home," Evelyn said, "since your officer kidnapped me from my driveway." "I'll drive you myself," Higgins said. "No," Evelyn said. "I don't want to be in a police car. Call a town car. And I want the name of the caller who reported me." "We can't release that without—" Higgins started, then stopped when he saw her eyes. "I'll get it." While they waited for the car, the station was in a state of controlled panic. Phones were ringing. The chief was on the line. The city attorney was being paged. Everyone knew what this meant. This wasn't just a bad arrest. This was a nuclear event. Evelyn stood by the counter. She refused to sit. She refused coffee. She just waited. When the town car arrived, Higgins walked her out. "Judge," he said quietly as he opened the door for her. "I know this doesn't mean much right now, but I am truly sorry. This isn't who we are." Evelyn paused before getting in. She looked at Higgins, a man she had respected in the past. "Lieutenant," she said, "the problem is that this is exactly who that officer was. And you gave him a badge and a gun. You didn't train him to respect the Constitution. You trained him to demand submission. And today he demanded it from the wrong person. But what keeps me up at night isn't what happened to me. It's what he's done to people who aren't federal judges. People who couldn't stand up to him." She got in the car. "I'll see you in court, Lieutenant. But this time I'll be on the other side of the bench." The lawsuit was filed 48 hours later. Vance v. City of San Diego, Officer Kyle Braden et al. It was a masterpiece of legal writing. It didn't just allege false arrest. It alleged a systemic violation of civil rights failure to train and racial profiling. It cited the timestamps. It cited the case law. It was 25 pages of scorched earth. The media storm was instantaneous. The video from Mr. Henderson's phone leaked to the press. It showed everything: the calm judge, the aggressive cop, the beautiful garden, the handcuffs. It was played on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. The headline was everywhere: "Gardening while Black federal judge arrested in her own driveway." The internet did what the internet does. They found Braden's social media. They found photos of him wearing shirts with aggressive slogans. But the real damage came from the discovery phase of the lawsuit. Evelyn's legal team, the best civil rights firm in the state, demanded Braden's entire disciplinary history and his stop logs. What they found was a pattern that the department had ignored. Over his 6 years, Braden had stopped Black motorists in affluent neighborhoods at a rate 4 times higher than his peers. He had a history of contempt of cop arrests, charges of obstruction that were later dropped because there was no underlying crime. He had done this before. He had arrested a Black architect for loitering at a construction site he was designing. He had detained a Black doctor for suspicious activity while he was jogging. Those people had filed complaints. The department had investigated and found Braden exonerated, or the complaints unfounded. Why? Because it was their word against his. But this time, the victim was a federal magistrate. This time, the credibility gap didn't exist. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened a pattern or practice investigation into the precinct. They weren't just looking at Braden anymore. They were looking at the supervisors who signed off on his reports. They were looking at Lieutenant Higgins. They were looking at Sergeant Miller. In her deposition, Evelyn Vance sat across from the city attorney. "Judge Vance," the attorney asked, looking tired. "We are prepared to offer a significant settlement. We want to close this chapter." "This isn't about money," Evelyn said, her voice recorded by the stenographer. "This is about the fact that I cannot water my roses without fearing for my liberty. It is about the fact that if I had reached for my phone instead of my pocket, I might be dead. You cannot pay me enough to forget that." But they tried. The city knew they would lose at trial. A jury would destroy them. The settlement was announced 6 months later. The city agreed to pay Evelyn Vance $950,000. It was one of the largest individual payouts for a wrongful arrest in the city's history, but the non-monetary terms were what mattered to Evelyn. Officer Kyle Braden was terminated, not allowed to resign, fired. His certification was revoked, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. The department was forced to implement a new policy for suspicious person calls, requiring officers to observe criminal behavior before initiating a stop. All officers were required to undergo 40 hours of constitutional law training, specifically regarding the Fourth Amendment, and Terry stops taught by independent legal experts. Evelyn donated the entire post-tax amount of the settlement to a legal defense fund for indigent defendants, people who had been arrested by officers like Braden but couldn't afford to fight back. 1 year later, Evelyn was back in her garden. It was a Tuesday. The sun was shining. The Mr. Lincoln roses were in full bloom, their deep red petals vibrant against the green leaves. She held the hose, the water misting gently over the flowers. A police car turned the corner. It drove slowly. Evelyn tensed up. Her heart rate spiked. Even after the apology, after the lawsuit, after the victory, the trauma was there. The body remembers what the mind tries to rationalize. The cruiser rolled by. The officer inside a young woman this time waved politely. Evelyn hesitated, then gave a small, stiff wave back. She watched the car disappear down the street. She took a deep breath, smelling the roses, but the sweetness was tinged with something else now. The innocence of her sanctuary was gone. She was safe, she was vindicated, but she would never again feel completely free in her own front yard. And that is the tragedy that no settlement check can fix. The story of Judge Vance is a victory. Yes, the bad guy lost, the good guy won. The system eventually worked, but only because the victim was part of the system. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. What happens when the person in the driveway isn't a judge? What happens when it's a teacher, a nurse, or a mechanic who doesn't know Hebel from a hole in the ground? Freedom shouldn't require a law degree. Dignity shouldn't require a badge. If this story made your blood boil, if it made you think about who the law protects and who it targets, I need to know. Do you think the officer would have been fired if Evelyn wasn't a judge? What would you have done if you were in her shoes? Would you have shown ID or stood your ground? Let me know in the comments below. And please subscribe and share this video. We have to keep telling these stories until we don't have any more of them to tell. Stay safe, know your rights, and I'll see you in the next one.